All right, greetings and welcome to the Dr. J Vlog series. It is Wednesday, July 23rd, 2025, and on Wednesdays we talk about emotional well-being and relationships. And on this particular Wednesday, we are celebrating a mini milestone of sorts. This is my 200th consecutive day or a daily vlog that I posted. That's right, 200 straight days now. I've posted a new vlog in the Dr. J Vlog series every single day. Honest. So 200 and counting. So at least I'm consistent. And I'm pretty doggone honest too. And that's the theme this week, or at least I try to be, both in terms of what I know and what I don't know. And obviously here we're talking about a vlog series. And so I'm trying to provide information about different issues, different subject matters, some of which I'm more of an expert, quote unquote, than on others. But nonetheless, hopefully what you're getting from me is a more radically honest view of things and an optimistic view at the same time. So that means that basically when I talk about radical honesty, that means essentially telling the truth no matter what the consequences, if you will, no matter how uncomfortable or how inconvenient that might be. Now, I'm not entirely sold on this idea, at least in all contexts. That is, there are ways to make exceptions, shall we say. All right. I do think there are times when we can and probably should hold back some information or our opinions. I don't mean to lie, but rather to keep our truest opinions or certain information to ourselves rather than necessarily sharing everything, whatever we want, whenever we want. So that said, I do believe in trying to be as radically honest, at the very least, with oneself as you can be. So that means taking stock of how you think and what you're doing and how you feel about yourself on a regular basis. I don't mean to be self-absorbed, but I mean to sort of just take that good, honest, hard look at yourself from time to time. So what are you doing well? Where are you struggling? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What would you like to change in your life? What areas would you like to improve, perhaps about yourself? And again, that includes both thoughts and behaviors. When we think about what we'd like to change, we usually think in behavioral terms, but we can also think about it in terms of how we think about things. So, for example, recently, I was unsettled about a particular situation, shall we say, something that was happening in my personal life, not involving the family, but outside of the family, if you will. And I was bothered essentially by something that somebody was doing in the context that things were, something was happening and unfolding, and it was indirectly, more than directly, affecting me. But I was taking it a bit too personally. And so I took a step back finally, and I mentioned the problem to my wife, since she's a trusted partner and she can often offer helpful advice. But I framed it this way. I said something like, I actually remember this. I remember saying, I'm not happy about the way I'm thinking about this situation. I think I need to change my perspective. So I wasn't coming out and saying, oh, I'm wrong or I'm screwed up or I'm messed up or whatever. I just wasn't happy. I had this sense that, maybe I'm just not seeing things in the proper light, or maybe I've attributed, too much weight or to this or that statement or this or that event or what have you. Bottom line is that we had a 5-minute conversation back and forth, just talking about different aspects and what was happening, and it was incredibly helpful because then I was able to sort of figure out exactly what was bothering me. And it wasn't the obvious thing. It wasn't something overt, but I was able to make a connection to something else. And then I could sort of think about the issue in a new way once I made that connection. So I realized the thing that was bothering me really wasn't bothering me at all. It was about something else in that relationship, in that particular context. And so, yeah, I basically had figured out a new way to think about the issue, and really it hasn't bothered me since. So, and what's interesting is that nothing else really changed materially or behaviorally or what have you. But really all that changed was more or less how I think about the situation. Okay, So, and I wouldn't have gotten that solution then, or come up with that, if I hadn't been willing to be honest with myself and take a good hard look and then have a conversation and so on. So, my point is then, if you can be honest with yourself, then that's a great place to start. We all have blinders on. We all have different sources of personal bias, as I've talked about before. So, if you can break through then with yourself, and especially by being radically honest with yourself, then you'll find that there are so many ways then that you can actively and directly start to improve yourself and your life. And then that should hopefully lay the groundwork for how you approach others, but especially in terms of your private life, your family relationships, your relationship with your significant other, if applicable. And so this notion then that honesty is the best policy, we've all heard it. It crops up often in these discussions, and I have to agree with the adage. I do think that honesty is the best policy in general. So honesty is obviously crucial then, because without honesty, it's difficult to establish trust in a relationship. And now, most obviously, that means that we shouldn't be lying or cheating on our partners, for example. But it also means not deliberately hiding important information either. So that's where you might have to force yourself at times to be more radically open and honest. In other words, if there's information that you judge to be especially important or impactful to the other person or to your relationship, then in my view, you have sort of an obligation. You're better off sharing that information. You might just have to choose an appropriate time or place. I don't mean just blurt it out whenever it comes on, becomes top of the mind. But you might have to figure out, do some planning, do some scheduling of a meeting or whatever to discuss the matter. But my point is that don't put it off too long, and don't continue to hide or withhold really important information. Okay? And then there's another aspect of being honest that I think is also equally important. And that is, I'm recommending, or I believe that you should try to be your authentic self with your partner or with your loved ones or with your children. Now, again, that doesn't mean that you just act crazy and do whatever you want without thinking about other people or thinking about situations. But it does mean that you'll try to be more honest, and self-consciously so, in terms of how you express yourself, your thoughts, and your beliefs, and even your feelings. Again, for me, that doesn't mean just saying whatever you think or whatever you feel nonstop. That's crazy. You have to always consider others. You're in relationships, you're in social settings, you're in family settings, whatever the situation might be. So there's always a social context, and you have to try to read that situation too. So if someone's already upset, for example, you might not want to share some additional harsh news or make them feel like you're dumping on them further. There's a time and a place to share important information. So let's say your partner shares with you that they just got fired for whatever reason, some kind of incompetence, they screwed up, or they didn't pay proper attention to the company rules for documenting sales or following certain protocols. They're already upset, especially if they've lost their job, right? So even if you've seen your partner sort of flout the rules or act in an absent-minded way on a regular basis, that's probably not the time to say, well, you often don't pay attention at home, so I'm not surprised that this has come back to bite you in the ass at your job. No, that's not going to be helpful. So instead of being radically honest, in this case, I'd set aside that kind of a comment and focus on my partner's emotional well-being. So read the situation. And at a later junction, it might make sense to have a constructive conversation about the issue at hand or the issue you've seen with your partner that might be impacting their professional life. That's what I mean about kind of reading the immediacy then of the situation. So just because you'd like to be honest doesn't mean you have to say what you really think at that particular moment. In general, though, I do think it's important to try to be as honest as you can with your loved ones, with your others, without hiding or suppressing your views or being afraid of how they might respond. and also without deliberately manipulating them in terms of how you frame things. Then you can establish healthier, wholesome relationships. I have that kind of a relationship, I believe, a truly healthy and wholesome one, with my closest sibling. I have several, but I have one that I'm particularly close to. And what I mean by that is we know that we can trust each other. We know that even if we disagree, we can be honest with each other, and we can tell each other what we really think and about what's happening, or about important issues with certain people or whatever in our lives. So we don't have to sort of walk on the proverbial eggshells with each other, or worry about how we frame things and if we're going to offend the other person. But we know that not just because we love each other, although we do, but rather because we know that we're there for each other. And we'd never intentionally try to hurt the other person or manipulate them or use them for whatever reasons. We're just there for each other. We are who we are, and we communicate and talk about whatever we need to talk about. We know we can go to the other person and just be honest with each other. So that's my general advice in terms of establishing open and honest relationships with your partner, ideally, or your sister, or your loved ones in general, including your children, if you have children. Again, that doesn't mean you can't criticize or disagree. Of course you can. But the reason that you can criticize and disagree, it's really twofold. On the one hand, first, you've spent months or probably years, hopefully, building a healthy, trusting relationship with lots of material and social and emotional support along the way. So ideally, you've been complimenting the person and helping and supporting that person all along, and vice versa, and preferably with a lot of I love you included along the way. And second, you've been building that trust by being honest with each other and not manipulative, hopefully by using constructive criticism techniques along the way as appropriate, rather than harsh or hurtful language or even violence. Because if you really used harsh language in the past, or you've given scathing critiques to someone close to you, and use that biting tongue of yours in hurtful ways, or even if you've been physically, especially if you've even been at times physically aggressive or even violent, then obviously it's hard to establish a trusting relationship with each other. And if that's the case, then it's hard to be honest. So in sum, invest your energy in learning to be honest first with yourself, and then hopefully with your important relationships. Be authentic and share not just the best of yourself, but at times some of your negatives, some of your struggles. But again, not because you want to dump on the other person, but to show them that you're a real person. And that at times that means you're going to have some anxiety, you're going to have some problems. It's not always, rainbows and butterflies in life. But at the same time, you want to try to be able to share that in a positive way with your partner, with your family members, because you care about them and they care about you. So it's okay to share some of your struggles at times. And in being yourself and in being honest with who you are and what you're about and what you're doing and where you're going with your life, you'll be building trust continually, daily, hopefully. And then hopefully permanent partnerships with your significant other, with the loved ones in your life. And we tend to do much better in life, quite frankly, when we're a part of a healthy team, or maybe several teams, if you will, rather than just on our own all the time. So in closing, allow yourself to be vulnerable at times with your partner, with your family, because you trust each other. Encourage each other to share as well, and to create safe spaces and times to do that with each other, to share your thoughts and feelings as constructively as you can. And if you can't do that because you're really upset, be honest in that regard too. Just say, listen, I'm sorry, I'm not in a good place right now. I don't really want to talk about this. But I promise, let's talk about this when I'm feeling a little better, okay? Whatever, something like that. maybe we can meet tomorrow. And indeed, maybe we can as well. So in the meantime, may you and yours continue to create peace in your lives, nurture love in your hearts, and dole out hugs in abundance while building trust through honesty. See you soon.